One Piece features a series of people with a diverse range of intellects. Some incredibly smart, some incredibly dumb, and others incredibly mixed. Hello humans of the world, I'm Dawn of the World, welcome aboard. Today I'm going to shine a light on the intellectual strengths and weaknesses of a portion of the Straw Hat Pirates. This is actually the third video I've made on this topic, and there's no reason to watch the videos in any particular order, but the first video covers exclusively Luffy, it's up here, and last week I shared a video covering Zoro, Nami, Usopp and Chopper, it is also here, and I'll be covering Sanji and the remaining crew in the following. The Straw Hats are a brilliant case study in the numerous ways intellect can manifest. There are so many different ways of being smart, but there's also so many different ways of being dumb. On that note, let me be your guide through the quip, qualms, and questionable decisions of this particular portion of the crew, starting with the wonder of the world that is Sanji. Sanji is always a step ahead of the game. When it comes to the East Blue crew, where Usopp and Nami are the brains and Zoro and Luffy are the brawn, Sanji operates as the in-between man, the amalgamation of both, and he is the keeper of cool. Most of the time. You always know that when he disappears for a few chapters while everyone else is caught up in chaos, he's pulling something very clever behind the scenes. His whole Mr. Prince cover during the Alabasta saga got the whole crew out of a lot of trouble, and that similar side of him was very present during Water 7, being the person able to track Robin down to the sea train and informing the rest of the crew, well, Nami specifically, about the situation. And then in Enies Lobby, his forward thinking allowed the crew and allies to ultimately escape. Not to mention that during that exact same arc, his emotional intelligence was second to none, knowing exactly what needed to be said to Usopp and when to say it. His everyone has things they can and can't do, so I'll do what you can't do and you can do what I can't do line to this day remains to be an excellent example of what makes the Straw Hats such a powerful crew. They all have different strengths and weaknesses, and wherever one person may have a weakness, someone else will have a strength. On top of this, Sanji is also a culinary genius, able to replicate a huge and complex recipe just by smelling the final product. That is superhuman levels of good, okay? And as genius as this man is, he is also so insufferably dumb. There is a fine line between chivalry and stupidity, and this man saunters down it like no one's business. Sanji, like many a member of the Straw Hat crew, is quite susceptible to what we will call shenanigans. Whenever Usopp and Luffy are goofing off, there is quite the chance that he will join in, except for when he doesn't. But often he will join them. He is a fun-loving guy after all. He is also a woman-loving guy. Sanji crossing paths with a pretty girl almost always triggers a knee-jerk reaction that sends him from cool badass to unintelligible pile of drivel. Also, despite his aforementioned emotional intelligence, more often than not, the second Zoro is in sight, all of that completely disintegrates and his feral response is activated. I feel like out of he and Zoro, he might be the one who picks the most fights. Though Zoro definitely picks his fair share too, but I think Sanji picks a few more. He's the more petty, less mature of the two if I had to pick one. However, I also think that out of those two, he's also more often said something nice or nice adjacent about Zoro behind Zoro's back, which I think is really sweet of him. I feel the only reason Zoro doesn't tend to do this as well is because Zoro is emotionally constipated and tends not to be in touch with his feelings as Sanji is, and that's fine too. So, Robin. How is she dumb? An extremely accomplished archaeologist, an expert in espionage, Luffy's go-to encyclopedic powerhouse of a woman. Well, Robin's clearly not dumb at all, however, there are some aspects of her social skills that are a little subpar. For one thing, there's her morbid commentary at inappropriate times. While yes, this is just her dark humour brought upon by her years of hardship, it's sometimes as though she's missing the little person inside her head who tells her, maybe we shouldn't say this thing now. To be fair, she doesn't voice everything she thinks. In fact, the more childish of her thoughts she keeps to herself, us viewers having the privilege of being privy to the delightful insights of Robin's inner child. For as much violence, death, destruction, and despair Robin may have experienced throughout her life, there are very many basic experiences that she didn't get to live until much later on, such as, say, introducing one friend you know from one place to another friend you know from another place. I probably first experienced this at 5 or 6, introducing a friend from kindy to a family friend or an old friend from preschool. But Robin first experiences this at 30 years of age. This occurs during the Dressrosa arc when her old old pals from the revolutionaries, Sabo and Koala, show up on the scene. Meanwhile, her other friend, her crewmate Usopp, is just laying there totally beaten to a pulp. And Robin seems almost blind to this state because she's so caught up in the excitement of, for the first time, introducing one friend to a group of other friends. She just props him up like, "This is my friend Usopp." Usopp manages some kind of garbled, pained greeting while Sabo and Koala gently prompt Robin that maybe let the guy rest. He's clearly out of time. I love this part actually. It's actually really sweet. Robin has really come out of her shell in the time that she's been with the Straw Hats. And over the past few years, we've really been seeing the more expressive, carefree side of her personality that she would have developed were it not for the O'Hara incident. She's living her best life, good for her. And now let's talk about Franky. Franky is a lot of things. Where does Franky start? Where does Franky end? Very early from his introduction, we learn that he is rowdy, reckless, terrible with money, and a general menace. Like Sanji, he is one who tends to teeter between being the mature voice of reason and succumbing to the shenanigans, but more on that in a bit. Among his highlight reel, we have such moments as the incident on Karakuri Island, where he pressed a button that clearly depicted a skull and crossbones, denoting danger or death, with the phrase, a pirate mark. I can excuse a 9-year-old Chopper for making a similar mistake back in the day, but Franky, you are a 34-year-old growing-ass man. How did you not know? To reference Chopper again, there was also another cold time in another cold place, that being Punk Hazard. Maybe that's the thing. He was born in South Blue, where it generally tends to be hot, and then he grew up in Water 7, which seems to have a warm climate. Maybe he's not used to the cold and it weakens his brain circuits. But anyway, when he was on Punk Hazard and trapped in Chopper's body, Chopper gave him a couple of so-called beans, but specifically told him not to use them to go into Monster Point unless he absolutely needed it, because he wouldn't be able to control the form, and then he took the pills immediately. Because, you know, he was clearly jealous of the size of Monster Chopper in Fishman Island, and he just had to live out all of his giant cryptid reindeer dreams. But with great dumbery comes great smartery. Franky has always been a genius well beyond his years when it comes to all things shipwright, carpentry, construction, innovation. As a 10-year-old child, he constructed a functioning cannon out of trash he'd found in a scrap heap. All throughout his childhood and teen and younger years, he constructed a variety of ships, each more complex than the last. And what's more, he literally rebuilt himself while at death's door. The thing is, Franky never actually chose to become a cyborg. It was kind of a do or die type of deal. And I don't doubt that in an alternate timeline where he was never hit by the sea train or injured to such an extent, that he wouldn't still have added a couple of modifications to his body, but those would have been non-essential for his survival. Because without his cybernetic enhancements, he'd be a dead man. And because of this, Franky is technically a disabled character, but we never see him as such because his mobility aids and enhancements that he's built into himself make him more able-bodied than he's ever been before. However, his intelligence goes beyond even his cybernetics. In my experience, most people tend to see him as the outrageous dumbass traits mixed with some super cyborg carpentry skills, and that's basically it. I think people don't tend to see him as that deep of a character, which is why he often ranks last in popularity polls amongst the Straw Hats. But there is so much more to his character than what I've mentioned so far. It's easy to get caught up in all the pizzazz, in all the beams, in all the super, but Franky is incredibly emotionally perceptive. I rarely see anybody credit him for this, but I would say Franky is one of the most emotionally intelligent characters in the crew. He's always shown to be in touch with his emotions, and I think Oda has done this on purpose to show us that even though he's a cyborg, Franky is still very human and is in fact more in touch with his emotions than the average person. And a lot of the time when he is putting on a show, he's doing it for the fans, for Luffy, for Usopp, for Chopper, for the kids, because it makes them happy and then that makes him happy. He knows when to be serious and when to be silly, and he can switch between the two so quickly. Like when they're heading down to Fishman Island, he says rather seriously that there's something important he needs to tell all of them, and Luffy, Usopp and Chopper immediately clamor over his robot abilities, which he then humors by momentarily acting like a robot for them, before quickly switching back to the serious stuff. Furthermore, he seems to always know exactly what to say and when to say it. His scene in Water 7 with Usopp when they bond over the Mary, and Usopp opens up to him about the Clabataman. Usopp hadn't even told the crew about that, but Franky immediately believes him and tells him all about it, and That's probably one of my favorite scenes. Another of my favorite scenes is Franky's first meeting with Robin, where despite knowing about her as a threat for literal years, he becomes the first person to ever tell her that there's no crime in her existence. Because by her actions alone, he could tell that everything the government had said about her was a lie. And in Dressrosa, we get to see him as this amazing voice of reason to Luffy, where he takes him along to get information in a very ex-underworld boss kind of way, before encouraging Luffy to take place in the tournament because, in his words, regret is a pain in the ass. Also in Dressrosa is his fight against Senior Pink, which on the surface seems like a really stupid fight, but is actually filled with a huge amount of understanding and acknowledgement of one another's mindsets. Furthermore, he is so supporting and encouraging of his crew. He's often ranked last in the Straw Hat popularity polls, but I don't think he would mind, since he's all about lifting up his crew and supporting them in every sense of the word. In another video, I'll go into this more and talk more about how he really is kind of more of a father figure to many of the people in the crew, due to his desire to be like his mentor slash father figure Tom, which is even more paramount than his desire to be a shipwright, but I think I rest my case for now. So, Brook. My anime husband is honestly kinda dumb, but as you all know, I love him. Like Robin, he tends to leave a little to be desired socially. Maybe it's a West Blue thing, or maybe it's stemmed from some kind of deep shared trauma surrounding loneliness. Regardless, it's undeniable that Brook's social skills are not the optimum, but he did spend 50 years on his own surrounded by the corpses of his deceased crewmates, so we can cut him a little slack, I think. At the same time, the shameless panty fixation, or asking to be lent money when panties are a physical impossibility, the opting to sit back and relax when being told to wait during a crisis. To be fair, not his worst idea. And the call this thing what you will, blatant cockblocking. It is clear that Brook lacks self-awareness. In fact, he lacks self-awareness to the point of one time seeming to even forget he was a fruit user when he and Chopper, with only the best intentions at heart, dove into the ocean in their efforts to rescue a sinking Luffy. And of course, they sank. Also, the fact he's a skeleton, yet he's so scared of all things spooky and paranormal. I'm sorry, that's peak. A skeleton being scared of ghosts and zombies is so perfectly hilarious, it doesn't get much funnier than that. He screams louder than anyone when Davy Jones' ghost ship shows up, and I love poetic cinema. Also, down in Fishman Island was that time when he, Zoro, and Usopp were captured, and he could have helped them escape by playing the part of a truly deceased dead skeleton, but this is Brook we're talking about. And you could sooner divert a river from its path than deny Brook's nature. However, all credit where it is due, Brook is a musical genius who can play any piece on any instrument. He is the musician that Luffy always wanted. Furthermore, we should not sleep on the fact that Brook lived an entire life long before anyone else in the crew was even born, and has on numerous occasions proven that he knows a lot more than he lets on. He may even have met Roger, but the thing is, he only brings these things up if or when they are relevant. Also, him getting the poneglyph imprints during Whole Cake Island, that was smooth. Almost as smooth as Jinbe on a day-to-day basis. Jinbe is a man with a plan. Like Brook, he also has a background in being a captain of a different crew prior to joining the Straw Hats. My man has it all. He's tactical, he's charming, he's diplomatic, he's a negotiatory genius. His speech to Big Mom in Whole Cake Island when he announced his departure from serving under her, iconic. And let's not forget the superb and life-saving interpersonal skills he displayed for Luffy post-Marineford. Luffy and Jinbe have this really special relationship, wherein Luffy has been the guiding light, the North Star, the sun, to all of his crewmates at their lowest points, where they'd just about given up. But with Jinbe, it was the other way around, and Jinbe saved Luffy from that darkness through emotional intelligence, as Luffy had done for all his other crewmates up until that point. Jinbe is a smart man, a clever man, it's very sexy of him. He is a man with a plan, and he gets kind of caught up in the details of that plan. In fact, he's such a details-oriented person that at times he gets too caught up in those details. Now, this might be a bit of a stretch, but there was that point during Fishman Island where he had conceived of this ingenious plan to combat Haughty Jones and crew. The plan is set. The time they have to enact that plan is limited. But there is a problem. This plan doesn't have a name. This is such a small throwaway line of dialogue that could easily slip by unnoticed, which would be a shame because it adds such an endearing character trait. Because it doesn't need a name! But the fact he's thinking about it is wonderful. I can't wait to see more of Jinbe's interactions with the crew and see further how this trait and others might manifest. The crew as a whole is an unstoppable unit across the board, in brains and in brawn, as we've discovered. However, However, there seems to be a common area of weakness amongst a lot of them, and that is compliments, or being flattered by statements broadly considered a compliment. We first see this in Thriller Bark when Kuma comments on their increasing notoriety, and they do this. Worth noting is that these gags pretty much always include the supposedly level-headed Nami. We see it again in Punk Hazard. The gathered crew are highly skeptical of Luffy's choice to form an alliance with Law, distrustful of the Surgeon of Death, and warning Luffy of a potential betrayal. But the second Luffy says that even if Law does cause trouble, he has his crew who have trained hard and who he knows can get him out of trouble, and we get this reaction. After this, they never once question Luffy's alliance, a complete 180 turn on their former stances, won over by a simple and sweet compliment. But of course, this is also a demonstration of the complete faith Luffy has in his crew and they in him, which in turn can be seen throughout the crew in a similar moment during the Zou arc with Robin. When told the likeliness of her being kidnapped due to her knowledge of the poneglyphs, she responds that she has nothing to worry about because she has strong friends who will protect her. The crew take this as not just a compliment, but a moment to reinforce their drive and willingness to fight for their crewmate if ever the need arises. I guess in a sense this weakness is their support of and faith in each other, which is actually no weakness of any kind, but really a strength. Because their biggest strength is the fact that they aren't just some pirate crew with members that will come and go when it's convenient for them. They are essentially a family who look out for each other, who love each other, and have each other's backs. A family who make up for each other's areas of weakness with their own areas of strength. And out there, across the high seas, across the four blues, the Grand Line, the New World, that is something as rare as it is powerful. Let me know if there's anything you would like to add on in the comments below. I'm Dawn of the World, and I will see you next time. Later, guys.